And we are live. Guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Bassin Magazine podcast. The Bassin Magazine, guys. Bassin Magazine is the official magazine of the Weekend Angler. With me tonight, I have one of my favorite guests to have on. Boy, I've known this guy for 25 years, and I have fished smallmouth bass with Mike Norris for the last 25 years, and every time we've ever targeted them together, we have caught fish. How are you doing tonight, Mike?
I'm doing great. I'm up here in Wisconsin. We're getting a little snowfall up here. I'm not happy about that, but the worst part is we got some really cold weather moving in. At least it was in the low 30s today, but there's going to be nighttime temperatures that are going to fall into the single digits here for the next couple of nights, which is really going to put my smallmouth fishing on hold because while most guys, and I would say just about everybody in Wisconsin is out hunting deer right now, I'm still fishing whenever I can get out on the water. And I've got some deep, clear lakes here that it takes a while for them to freeze up. And the only thing that stops me is if I don't have temperatures above freezing, I won't go.
Well, that sounds like the kind of weather that I would go up to Little Bay with. The first real cold snap of the year, I wanted to be up there because them walleyes just went nuts.
And you got that right. And I've got a lot of memories up there. I don't know if you and I ever went up there together.
We never went up there together.
Don't we think? Yeah.
I was usually going up there with Bill Kane and his buddies.
Yeah, and we did Sturgeon Bay, of course, in the fall. And but yeah, walleye fishing right now and smallmouth bass fishing on Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, which was, rated the number one bass lake a couple of years ago in one of the magazines here. That and Shemanigan Bay, which is up by Duluth Superior, noted smallmouth fisheries in the fall. And I have a lot of friends who've been up in those areas and they've been sending me some photos and they've been doing really good on both smallmouth and walleye. But now we've got this really cold weather in here. That's sort of slowing things down. Not the fishing, it's slowing the angler down. You got to remember, one of the things we'll talk about tonight is that the smallmouth don't slow down. It's an amazing thing to follow them through the fall and winter transitions.
Okay. The only thing I didn't tell you before is that, we're trying to keep podcasts to about 35 minutes now.
Okay.
So just so that you can kind of put that in your mind. But smallmouth bass in the fall, the late fall. Mike Norris, how are you catching them?
Well, let me run you through the fall period. You get into September and October, and up north here, the days get a little shorter. The water temperatures start to drop a little bit, and by mid-October, you're into what we would call the beginning of the fall turnover, and that's when we're losing the thermocline, and fish start to scatter because they can swim at all different kinds of depths. So it's an interesting time because smallmouth bass will still relate to bait fish, and bait fish will move shallow, particularly in October, because they're looking for warmer water, and the water's cooling and the shallows still receive sunlight during the day, so they will warm up during the day, and the smallmouth bass will follow them there. So you're still dealing with weeds, weed edges, and of course rocky flats, and these are primary smallmouth areas up north here. But when you get to where the water temperature starts to drop and it gets into mid-October to late October, you will find that those weeds will start to die off. And when they start to die off, Jay, they're eating oxygen up. And so the fish will vacate the shallow weed beds and they'll head for areas outside of the weed beds on flats where there's a mixture of water and there's oxygen in that water. So what happens then is you can run baits, jerk baits, great time. And when I'm talking flats, typically up north, you're in maybe 12 to 15 feet of water, 12 to 18 feet of water. It's a great period to be working jerk baits because the bass are basically, they're looking for bait fish to feed on. Jerk baits, you can cover a lot of areas. Remember, you're dealing with flats, and when you're dealing with flats, you're dealing with horizontal areas, okay? And so the fish will spread. So jerk baits allow you to make a lot of casts, working the bait, you're covering a lot of water, okay? And then another good bait, again, you want to cover water, horizontal presentations, is the Alabama rig. It looks like a school fish.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just a super, super bait for the early to mid-fall period. Now in Wisconsin, we're limited to 3 hooks per rod. So we have to modify our Alabama rigs. Typically, you can put 5 baits on an Alabama rig. So what we use is 2 screw locks, and we actually put a plastic Kitech swim bait on there, but we don't have hooks in them. So we've got 3, you got 5 rods all together in an Alabama rig. 3 of them have baits with hooks. The other 2 just have the baits on them, and they're just an attractor, like a spinner would be at that point. But very effective to roll them adjacent to drop-offs, adjacent to where you still find good green weed beds, and around structure like rock drop-offs, because you'll find a lot of fish, particularly smallmouth, moving into faster drop-off areas in the mid-October through November period.
Now, Mike, when you say jerk baits, are you working them real slowly?
No, I actually don't. I mean, I do pause, but you want to cover a lot of water. Again, smallmouth by nature, as you get into the fall period, Jay, they start to group up more. Sure. And then I believe they become competitive with each other. They're not spread out as much as they were during the summer season. And so they're roaming flats, they're looking for bait, and they can be really aggressive. That's the amazing thing about smallmouth bass during the fall and the cold water period is how aggressive they remain. A lot of fish, typically I don't start to see any more largemouth bass biting anymore, but smallmouth bass, it is without doubt absolutely the best time of the year to catch them. That you catch numbers of them and you catch big fish because they are competitive. They're eating, they sense that cold water. They know if they don't bite now, it's going to be a cold winter.
Okay, we have a question from an observer, or person who's listening in. He says, it's for Cajun Rob, who's a very good friend of the Bass and Magazine podcast. He said, where do you run your hitchhiker baits with no hooks on an A-rig? On the top 2?
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Absolutely on the top 2. I believe smallmouth typically come up from behind the A-rig, and I think they're usually below it because you are, reeling it back in and it's elevated off the bottom. And I think most of the time that they're going to strike one of the lower baits. So I won't say 100% that that's true, but the odds are better that if you run the center wire with a Kitech with a hook and the 2 lower arms with Kitechs and hooks, you're going to have a better percentage of hookups. You're going to get more bites.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Cajun Rob.
That was a great question.
Yeah, Cajun Rob always has good questions. He fishes a lot of. I bet you he fishes 6-8 tournaments a year. He's very active, very, very active.
Good for him. I hope he's fishing some smallmouth lakes down wherever he's located.
He's located in southern Kentucky, so yes, he fishes some in eastern Tennessee smallmouth lakes.
Yeah, he would have smallmouth there definitely.
So yeah, he's very familiar with spotted bass, largemouth bass, and smallmouth bass.
Good for him. And he has a long season, a much longer season than I do, even though I probably extend my season longer than most anglers up here because, like I said, most guys have their boats put away right now, and they're out hunting, and my boat really just never gets winterized. I keep it in the garage, and I use it, and I've been out as late or early, if you want to call it, of January up to mid-January, fishing open water.
I bet you some of the walleye fishermen have their boats out as often or as long as you, but none of the smallmouth fishermen.
No, I pretty much own the lake, except that I do have a couple friends who are walleye fanatics, and they are out there. And I got to give them a lot of credit because they're not only fishing walleyes in the same cold weather period that I'm fishing smallmouth, but they wait till it gets dark and they go out after the sun is set. And
you remember that's what we did up there in Little Bay. I mean, we'd come back to the bay and it would be iced over.
Yeah, I do remember that.
The harbor, and it was good that one of the boats was an aluminum boat, and he acted as our icebreaker because none of the guys with fiberglass wanted to do that.
Well, and it's yeah, and I have a story to tell you about Little Bay because the wind shifted one day. There had been ice at the boat launch. The guys that were launching broke the ice up. It floated out. But then the wind shifted that afternoon from west to east, and it blew all the ice back in, and we couldn't get the boats back into the boat launch. Yep. And this is a good point. I finally got in, backed my trailer down. Of course, now we got ice chunks floating all around us. Mm-hmm. I backed my trailer down and got the boat up in the trailer. It's dark out now, so we tied her down, went to the hotel, went out and had dinner, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and it was snowing, and got down to the launch ramp. And I have a bunk trailer, but it was a roller trailer that morning because what happened was there had been ice that got in between the bunks and the bottom of the boat that I didn't see at nighttime. And when I unlashed that boat, it went right down. Fortunately, Fortunately, I was close enough to the water that it just went down and hit the water. It hit a little bit of the ramp and then got into the water. And the guy I had sitting in the boat just sat there like, what the heck just happened, And yeah, so we're very fortunate. So one of the things I will tell people is when you're launching boat in cold weather, make sure that your boat is at the edge. And, don't take your nose strap off when it's still 20 feet above the ramp, above the water line, because you never know when it's going to start sliding off.
Also, guys, if you're going to do stuff like this, yes, I know I live down south, but man, Mike will tell you, I was out. Man, I used to fish the Illinois River longer than anybody else fished it. I was the last guy to leave it and the first guy to get on it. Take some time, de-ice the ramp, throw some salt out, throw some sand out, shovel. And if it's really bad, and you feel like you got to go.
One of the biggest mistakes, guys.
Another truck to your truck, and
one of the biggest mistakes guys make is that they launch their boat and they immediately pull the trailer out of the water. When you got cold weather like that, what you got to do is pull your trailer so that the bunks are above the water, and then stop and let all that water drain. You can't get all of it, but if you just wait 3 minutes, 80% of that water will fall back into the actual lake water, and then you pull it up, and that way you avoid icing up the ramps real bad.
Because man, it is so dangerous. I've seen I'm sure you have too. At Spring Valley, I've seen so many guys run into that big concrete walkway. I've seen guys slide right into the water.
I did it in Ottawa too, so
yeah, Ottawa isn't quite as.
Yeah. Just want to talk a little bit about, like I said, I stay out longer than most guys fishing smallmouth up north. And one of the reasons I can do that is that I happen to live on one of the lakes in Wisconsin that is very deep. It's called Big Green Lake. It's 236 feet deep. It's 7,300 acres. Certainly not a reservoir, but for Wisconsin standards, it's a pretty decent sized lake. And more importantly, with that extra deep water, it takes a long time for that lake to freeze. So it allows me, like the lake just south of me is frozen by December 1st. We're 2 weeks away from that happening, but that's only 23 feet deep. This lake with the extra depth it has, it stays wide open. And so it gives me a unique opportunity to fish smallmouth bass in the north when the water temperatures are in the low 30s, and I mean 33 degrees. I will tell you, I've been on the lake and actually seen it ice up while I'm on it. It's just thin ice at that point. But when I first started doing this, I would think that the smallmouth would slow down, but they don't. That's been the biggest surprise of it all. I will tell you that now that the weeds have died and your water temperature is down below 45 degrees now, and you're getting into that 40 degree and below water temperature, surface water temperature, that by that time your weeds are out of the picture. They just aren't going to be around weeds because they're mostly 100% dead. So what smallmouth do is they will continue to group up in bunches, and they'll do that usually on the first primary break. You'll also see them on the secondary breaks beyond the first primary break. But my point here is that they become extremely easy to find when that situation arrives, because you're running your electronics, and I quote people this all the time when I'm doing seminars: don't fish until you see them. Okay, so I don't go out and presuppose that I think they're going to be here. I go out and I just slowly, 5 to 10 miles an hour, drive up and down to those break lines. And I'm talking water, it could be the first primary break on Green Lake is like 21 to 35 feet. So I'm zigzagging back and forth, and all of a sudden I'll see a school of 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 or 12 smallmouth with arches. Now, the arches don't look very big, and they're very tight to the bottom. And the reason they don't look big is because the cone angle goes out a foot for every 3 feet down. So when you're in 35 feet of water, your cone angle is pretty large, and the larger your cone angle is hitting the bottom, the smaller the arches are going to be, because the cone angle is that much wider. So you'll see these small arches, and you might think, oh, what's those? Well, they're smallmouth bass, okay? And you take a waypoint on them, and you set up, and you fish them after that. Now, what'll happen is now you're in 35 feet of water, and the jerk bait, you're fishing jerk baits that are maybe going 5 to 10 feet down. And yeah, you can get smallmouth when they're really active to come up great distances, but in that cold weather, they just don't seem to react. So I actually go down to lures that I can fish more vertically in that deeper water. And one of them is a Demiki rig, just a small jig head, a 3/16 ounce jig head with a Demiki shad on it. And, something in a white or, a sort of minnow imitating color. And I'll get straight over them, see them in my electronics, get straight over them and drop that thing straight down, and I'll jiggle it, not in their face, but above them. Okay.
Above them. Okay.
Yeah. You stay about 2 feet above them. It's like pan fishing in the winter. You make them commit. And so you sit there and you jiggle it, you're just sort of shaking it a little bit, and then you raise it and you shake it a little bit, and you watch on your electronics, and you'll see the fish start to rise, and all of a sudden you got to connect. Great way to fish.
Drunk in the morning.
Yes, yeah. Before coffee, right? Or after you've had too much coffee. Another way is to use a drop shot rig, and put some kind of a minnow imitating shad-looking bait on there, or minnow-looking bait. So that's two great ways, but my favorite all-time way, because you can't beat it, is live bait rigging. And and I know there's guys will say, "Oh, I don't want a live bait rig," but I can tell you what, they really go for the meat. And so typically I'm live bait rigging with a Carolina rig. Instead of putting the plastic worm and dragging it behind the weight, I'm actually dragging one of three choices typically. Chubs, red-tailed chubs are the best if you can get those from the bait shops. Perch, but it has to be caught in the lake that you are fishing in Wisconsin. Regulations say you can use panfish for bait, but you can only use panfish that are caught in the lake that you're fishing. So if I brought a perch from another lake over, I'd be breaking the law. But if I go out and catch some perch and put them on, smallmouth bass love perch. And that's why you see so many perch lures nowadays. They're imitation perch colors and very effective for smallmouth bass. But perch, when the water temperature starts to get down below 45, they do become inactive and you can't catch them anymore. So, and chubs are history. You can't get them from the bait dealers anymore. So I actually go to suckers.
Okay.
A little sucker. Size of the fish that I like best is 4-inch in length. Okay, whether it be perch, chubs, or suckers, that 4-inch in length seems to be what my fish in my areas love to chow down on. Now, I can catch numbers of fish doing that, but if I want to catch big smallies, the bigger ones, and not worry about how many I'm catching, sometimes I'll go to perch that are up to 7 inches.
7 inches,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. You're amazed at what these fish will eat. And you've seen it. You've seen small fish eat a jerkbait that's longer than the fish, right?
I have.
You know what I mean?
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you catch a lot of pike doing this? Because pike are real active that time of the year too.
Well, that's a good. I'm glad you said that, Jay. Pike fishing on a lake, a deep, clear lake like Green Lake in Wisconsin. And I should mention for people from Wisconsin, if you're listening to this podcast, prime lakes are Lake Mendota, and you know Lake Mendota. You've been there.
Oh yeah.
Deep and clear, rocky structures. Lake Geneva.
Yes.
To the north of us, Big Trout Lake. These and Door County, Sturgeon Bay area, prime for this kind of fishing. But the northern pike, and that's what you asked about, they, lakes, northern pike are a cool water fish. So I don't know the semantics of how it all works, but we've heard that, they can live in a cooler environment below the thermocline. Well, in the summertime, I find all my pike at the thermocline, and it's usually about 35 feet in one of these clear lakes that I mentioned. So I do drag baits, live bait in the summertime for northern pike, and I catch them. And you catch your typical, 30 inches, 32 inches, maybe a 36, and you're feeling good. But where are the big fish? And where the big pike are is they go offshore and they follow bait out in open water during the summer period. But they come back in the fall, in the late fall, and I should say in the winter. And when you're on an open water lake like I'm on, I'm catching pike in January that look like pike that you would catch in Canada. They start at 40 inches and they go up from there. And the thing is you don't see those pike all summer long. So that's why I know they got to be offshore, and that's why you're not catching them during the summer. But boy, they come in where the smallies are at. They come in, the walleyes are coming in. And more importantly, these deep clear lakes are very often lakes that contain ciscos.
Yes.
And the ciscos spawn in November and December, and they follow those ciscos in, and it's a feed bag time. I when I'm catching smallmouth or northern pike or walleyes at this time of the year, if you measure the width of their belly, it's longer than the distance from their top going down to their belly, because they are so full of food. They are chowing down so bad. It's like you and I on Thanksgiving night. It was great, but oh my God, what am I going to do next, right? You're patting your belly going, oh, I ate too much, but that's what they do.
Or at one of those traditional Wisconsin, or one of those traditional Chicago pizza places.
Yeah, boy, you got that right. I tell you what, Wisconsin's got some good pizza too. So
they do. They do.
I try to stay away from it, but every once in a while, you just can't pass it up. It's great stuff. The interesting thing about smallmouth too is that when they're on these primary breaks, like I said, on my lakes, it's 21 to 35 feet. The second break is 45 to 60 feet. And then, so I'm talking about flats that go out and then they go real fast, and then they go out and real fast. Those real fast are the breaks, okay? Sure. And I don't know why it is that they stay on the breaks instead of on the flats, but that's what they do. They get on that ledge. Part of it may be is that when I'm dragging a Carolina rig with live bait, I'll find and feel and catch on my hook a lot of zebra mussels, which are common up north here. And as a result of that, these smallmouth bass think that these are gravel spots. And I don't know if they're eating zebra mussels, but they like to hang out wherever the zebra mussels are all over the bottom of the lake. So, yeah.
So I have a question here. So
sure.
So you're dragging this live bait. and you feel a bite, do they just tap or?
Boy, that's a good question too. Early this fall, they when I say that, I'm talking September and early October. They would devour it instantly. If I had a 4-inch bait on, live bait, they would devour it instantly. Of course, if you work in a jerk bait, you're just going to hook them. You're going to know it. But with the live bait, what they need to do, because you've got pectoral fins, okay, you got fins on top, they need to grab the bait, and then they need to turn it around so that the bait goes down their throat head first. Because when that happens, that folds their fins up, and it's a smooth transition from their mouth down into their stomach. If they try to eat the bait any other way, those fins are going to stick in that, that throat area over there, and they're going to choke and die. So typically, yes, if I'm using live bait and I feel, you feel a perch or you feel a chub shaking a little bit.
Yes.
And all of a sudden it'll be like someone just tapped you on the shoulder. It's a different feeling, like boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom,
and
boom. Yeah.
What I do is I'm running an open bail with my finger on the line, and I open up and I let the finger, open up and let the line go. I immediately put the boat on spot lock. I'm trolling at about a half mile an hour, okay, or drifting. There's 2 ways I do it, depending on how the wind's blowing. But when I feel that tap, 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 finger off the line, the bail's open, and I set my boat on spot lock, tell my buddy to get his line in and get the net. And this takes about 15 seconds. And then I reel up slowly until I feel the weight. And then I give it a really good hook set, and it's fish on. Yeah, so good question.
So you have to have a really good rod for that, don't you?
Yeah, I use a Grant Cuda rod. It's a super rod. It's a 7-foot medium light. Grant rods. They're out of Arlington Heights, Illinois. Beautiful fishing rod. It's very, very sensitive. It's American made, lifetime guarantee. You can't beat it. It feels great in your hand.
Rod for redfish. I need that superior hook setting for reds, and also I need to be able to fling whatever I'm using, a country mile sometimes to get all the way over.
You got it. Yeah, and I typically use a 7-foot. Like I said, it's a medium light, 7-foot. That gives me a little bit of a sensitive tip. So when those fish grab it, and you can release that line then, and they haven't let go of it because they haven't felt you or so.
And the thing about a Grant rod, I wouldn't be worried if I hooked into a 48-inch Northern with that.
No, you won't be worried about that. No, I haven't had
breaking it.
I haven't had I haven't had any problems. Setting drag is a good thing, because when talking about rods and stuff like that, I'm using spinning equipment most of the time, even though you could use bait casting equipment if you're Carolina rigging. But I usually keep my drag tightened down, okay, because I want to get a good hook set. Remember, I've got a piece of live bait that's anywhere from 4 to 7 inches in the mouth of that fish, and I'm using a 3/0 offset Gamakatsu hook, the Texas rig offset, which got the L bend in it. And the reason I use that is because with that long shank on it and that bend in it, if the fish has got the bait in his throat, I can reach in with my pliers and I can grab it at that bend, and I can just twist it like that, and it pops right back out. And now the fish doesn't have a hook in him anymore. And unfortunately, the perch doesn't look very good because they crush them. They absolutely crush them. Which reminds me, I want to tell you a little side story about that real quick, because my last 3 outings, we've always read about how territorial smallmouth bass are. My last 3 outings, I caught a 4-pound, 4-ounce smallmouth on the same fish. Okay, he has a broken fin on his back, just crushed. There's something wrong with something. Big must have hit him at one time or another. I've caught that same fish 3 times in my last 3 outings.
Jeez.
And I've never caught him any more than 40 feet away from my first waypoint for the first time I caught him. So it shows you how territorial smallmouth bass can be. It also shows you how aggressive they are, that they'll just continue. Like I said, when you're fishing 33, 34-degree water and you do a drift over some smallmouth bass that are on a primary break line and you get that bait in front of them, it's like it's July. They whack it and it's amazing. Now, I will say they don't fight as hard as they do in July, and you know how hard smallmouths can fight. But they want to eat. There's no doubt about that, and they'll eat all winter long. And when the ice does come on and I can't go out anymore, I don't ice fish. But with those waypoints, I'm sure if I went to those waypoints and vertical jigged ice fishing, I could probably still catch those fish. But when the ice does come off, which is usually around the first week of April, I go to those spots and the fish are still there. They're right where I left them in January on the same structure, same locations.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, guys, Mike is available. Mike is a licensed guide in the state of Wisconsin. His phone number is right there at the bottom on the crawler. Check him out. Check him out Facebook at Mike Norris, or call him at area code 630-842-8199. And Mike, you usually end the shows with shout outs. Do you have any shout outs you'd like to do?
Well, yeah, I can certainly Grant Rods. We talked about them a little bit. I'm also a big fan of the Z-Man products. When I'm fishing a Ned rig, I used to fish the Ned rig, the 2 3/4 inch bait. But if you can go to like Zoom, and they have a thing called a turbo crawl, and it's got nice big flappers on it, and it also floats. If you can cut the tail of that off, make it a little bit shorter, and stick it on a Z-Man head, and fish that for smallmouth over rocks during the summer, it makes the difference of whether you're catching 2-pounders or 3 to 4-pounders.
Wow.
It just, that bigger profile bait. And I don't like the length of it, so I cut that down because it matches more what my smallmouth in my lakes are size-wise that the smallmouth bass are eating. But if you take a bait like that, and any bait, you can get the Yamamoto's going to come out with one this year that floats. Z-Man's got great products that float like that. But instead of just using the Z-Man regular, I think they call it a turd, TURD.
TRD, yeah.
Yeah, TRD. Okay. Use that little bigger profile smallmouth bass bait on a Ned head rig, so when it hits the bottom, it stands up, and you'll improve your smallmouth fishing drastically.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you again for being on the show. It means a lot to have you on my show since I've known you for so long. And guys, I don't know if I talk about this enough, but Mike Norris was my mentor in the outdoors, the fishing industry, and actually he helped launch my career with a smallmouth bass that I caught while he was in my boat.
Yeah.
One fish was a lake record smallmouth
on Shabana Lake.
Shabana Lake. The second time I'd ever wacky rigged.
Yeah.
I was hooked after that, and I'm still hooked on wacky rigging. That was in 1998.
I don't remember the year, but I certainly remember the event. It'll always be a lasting memory in my mind. It was a great, great fun day.
Yeah, we caught a lot of fish that day, and I wanted to use a 10-inch ribbon tail, and you're like, "What are you doing, man?"
Throw one of these.
And I know how to fish, and you caught 6 fish. I caught 1, and okay, can I have one of those, please?
It's sort of interesting when you look at the statistics that you get on like the Bass Tour website or Major League Fishing websites. They now post a pie chart, what baits were used in a tournament. And you constantly see there's a little sidebar there that says, 65% of the baits were plastics, plastic worms, some type of plastic. Huge in the industry. It's huge for the manufacturers because they get used up, and you have to keep buying them. But there's a reason we keep buying them, because they work. They're just
plain work. And every elite pro, every Major League Fishing pro I've ever had on, including you, wacky rigs.
The wacky rig, yep. Ned rigs, drop
Every
shots,
single one of them.
yeah, Carolina rigging. Love it all. Yes.
Love it all. Well, thank you, Mike. Hey, guys, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into the Bassin Magazine podcast. Bassin Magazine is the official magazine of the Weekend Angler. Guys, it's Wednesday night. Time to start making your plans. Get out there on the water. Have some fun this weekend, particularly if you live down south. This is the time of the year when I get excited about fishing down here. Get out there in the water and fish, man. You only get to do this once. And Mike, stick around after the podcast is done. With that, guys, have a great week.